For centuries, alien civilizations have dismissed humans as primitive, emotional creatures unworthy of respect. They've conquered our colonies, enslaved our people, and treated us like cosmic insects. But they made one fatal mistake. They underestimated what happens when you corner a species that refuses to give up. Dr. Sarah Chun thought she was just a grieving daughter trying to understand her father's mysterious research. She had no idea that buried in his encrypted files lay the key to humanity's ultimate revenge. A secret so dangerous that 3 different alien empires would kill to possess it. A discovery so revolutionary that it would either elevate humanity to galactic dominance or destroy them completely. 21 years ago, her father died protecting this secret. Now, as alien fleets gather to finish what they started, Sarah must decide. Will she unlock the power that could save her species, or will she bury it forever to protect the galaxy from what humans are truly capable of? The universe is about to learn that when you push humanity to the brink, they don't just push back. They evolve into something far more terrifying than their enemies ever imagined. Welcome to the story of how a species of emotional primitives became the galaxy's apex predators. Sarah Chun pressed her palm against the biometric scanner, watching the red light turn green with a soft beep that echoed through the empty research facility. The heavy titanium door hissed open, revealing her father's laboratory for the first time since his death 21 years ago. Dust particles danced in the pale light, streaming through reinforced windows, settling on equipment that had once been at the cutting edge of human science. She stepped inside, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet that her father had insisted upon. A scientist's mind works better when his feet are comfortable, he used to say. The memory brought a sad smile to her face as she approached the massive desk dominating the center of the room. Everything looked exactly as he had left it, preserved by the automated systems that had continued running all these years. The hegemony attack on the research station had been sudden and brutal. The Zarathi Empire, along with their Keltran allies, had swept through the outer colonies like a plague, destroying everything humans had built over 3 centuries of expansion. Her father, Dr. Marcus Chun, had been one of the few scientists to receive advance warning. He had used those precious minutes to hide his research, transmitting encrypted files to dozens of locations throughout human space before the alien plasma cannons reduced the station to cosmic dust. Sarah had spent 2 decades trying to decode those files. As one of humanity's leading xenobiologists, she possessed both the scientific knowledge and the security clearance necessary to access her father's work. But the encryption he had used was beyond anything she had encountered. It required not just passwords and biometric data, but something more personal, something only his daughter would understand. She activated the main terminal, its holographic displays flickering to life with a warm blue glow. The system recognized her immediately, having been programmed with her genetic markers years ago. But instead of granting access, it presented her with a simple message floating in the air before her. Hello, Sarah. If you're reading this, then I am gone, and you have finally found your way home. The knowledge I am about to share with you will change everything. Are you ready to learn the truth about what humanity really is? Her hands trembled as she reached toward the confirmation prompt. 21 years of questions, of wondering why her father had been so secretive about his research, of living with the guilt that maybe she could have helped him if she had known what he was working on. 21 years of watching humanity struggle against alien oppression, losing ground with every passing year. The hegemony had not stopped with the outer colonies. They had pushed deeper into human space, claiming system after system. Earth itself remained free, but barely. The human military fought valiantly, but their technology was centuries behind their enemies. Plasma weapons against kinetic projectiles, energy shields against explosive charges. It was like bringing swords to a gunfight, except the gunfighters also had body armor and air support. What made the situation even more bitter was the aliens' attitude toward humanity. They didn't see humans as a threat to be eliminated, but as an annoyance to be managed. The Zarathi referred to humans as emotional primitives, creatures too unstable and violent to be trusted with advanced technology. The Keltrans called them chaos spawn, beings whose unpredictable nature made them unsuitable for civilized society. To the aliens, conquering human space wasn't a war, it was pest control. Sarah pressed the confirmation prompt, and the room around her transformed. Holographic displays materialized everywhere, showing star charts, biological diagrams, and mathematical equations that made her head spin. Her father's voice filled the air, speaking from recordings he had made in his final days. "Sarah, my dear daughter, I hope you have inherited not just my curiosity, but also my courage. What I am about to show you has been hidden from humanity for over 400 years. We are not alone in this universe, and we never have been. But, more importantly, we are not what we appear to be." The main display showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, with different colored regions marking various alien territories. The human sphere of influence appeared as a small yellow bubble in one corner, dwarfed by the vast empires surrounding it. "The Galactic Council has existed for over 10,000 years, her father's voice continued. They're the oldest and most advanced civilizations in this galaxy, and they have been watching us since we first developed spaceflight. What they discovered about humanity terrified them." A new image appeared, showing biological scans of human DNA compared to other species. Sarah leaned closer, her scientific training helping her parse the complex genetic structures. What she saw made no sense. Every sentient species in the galaxy shares certain genetic markers, signatures that indicate their evolutionary path from primitive life to sapience. Every species except one. Humans have no evolutionary ancestors on Earth that can account for our level of intelligence, our emotional complexity, or our adaptability. We appeared suddenly in the archaeological record, as if we were simply placed here. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She had studied xenobiology for her entire career, and she had always wondered about humanity's unique position among Earth species. The evolutionary gap between humans and their closest relatives was massive, filled with missing links that had never been found. The Council's investigation revealed the truth. Humans are not native to Earth. We are the descendants of refugees from a war that nearly destroyed the galaxy 50,000 years ago. Our ancestors were part of a species called the Architects, beings of incredible power and intelligence who built most of the technology that advanced civilizations still use today. The holographic display showed images of massive structures floating in space, cities the size of moons, and ships that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. The architecture was alien, yet somehow familiar, as if Sarah had seen it in dreams she couldn't quite remember. The architects were not warriors by nature, but when threatened, they became something else entirely. They developed weapons and tactics that made them nearly unstoppable. Their enemies learned too late that destroying an architect's city did not defeat them. It only made them angry. The survivors would rebuild stronger, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The way her father described the architects sounded uncomfortably familiar. Human history was filled with examples of civilizations rising from the ashes of destruction, often emerging more powerful than before. The war ended when the architects chose exile over genocide. They scattered their people across the galaxy, wiping their own memories to ensure that the weapons they had created would never be used again. Most of these refugee populations died out over the millennia, but one group survived. They found a small blue planet on the edge of the galaxy and started over, slowly rebuilding their civilization without remembering what they had once been. The display zoomed in on Earth, showing the development of human civilization from the first cities to spaceflight. But now Sarah could see patterns she had never noticed before. The rapid advancement of human technology, especially during times of conflict. The way humans seem to innovate most effectively when facing extinction. The emotional intensity that aliens found so disturbing but that drove humans to achieve impossible things. The Council has spent the last 4 centuries trying to keep humanity contained, her father's voice said. They know that if humans ever rediscover their true nature, the galaxy will face another architect war. But they also know that directly attacking Earth would likely trigger the very awakening they fear. So they have used indirect methods, supporting human conflicts, ensuring that we remain divided, and now using proxy species like the hegemony to slowly strangle our expansion. Sarah began to understand the true scope of what her father had discovered. Every major disaster in human history, every war that had set back technological progress, every plague or famine that had reduced human population growth, all of it had been carefully orchestrated to keep humanity from reaching its potential. But I found something they missed, her father continued, his voice taking on an excited tone. The memory wipe the architects performed on themselves was not perfect. The knowledge is still there, locked away in human DNA, waiting for the right trigger to activate it. I spent 30 years learning how to access those memories, and, Sarah, what I found will change everything. The display shifted to show complex biological pathways in the human brain, highlighting neural structures that appeared dormant in most people. Sarah realized she was looking at the biological basis for what humans called intuition, the subconscious knowledge that allowed them to make leaps of logic that other species found impossible to follow. The trigger is emotional stress combined with focused determination, her father explained. When humans face impossible odds and refuse to give up, their architect heritage begins to awaken. This is why human soldiers sometimes perform miracles on the battlefield. It is why human scientists make breakthrough discoveries when facing deadlines that should be impossible to meet. It is why humans have always been at their best when things seem hopeless. Sarah thought about her own experiences, the times when she had solved problems that should have taken months of research, moments when the answer had simply appeared in her mind as if it had always been there. She thought about the stories of human heroes throughout history, people who had accomplished the impossible when everything was on the line. I've spent the last 5 years developing a controlled method for triggering this awakening, her father's voice said. Not the random activation that occurs naturally, but a systematic process that can unlock the full potential of human consciousness. The implications are staggering, Sarah. Humans are not the weak species that the galaxy believes us to be. We are the descendants of the beings who built galactic civilization itself. The recording paused, and her father's image appeared as a full hologram, looking exactly as Sarah remembered him. His kind eyes held a mixture of excitement and fear that made her heart ache. I know this is overwhelming, my dear. I know it changes everything you thought you knew about humanity and our place in the universe. But you must understand the danger we face. The hegemony attack on this station was not random. The Council has decided that humanity has become too dangerous to contain through indirect methods. They are moving to eliminate us entirely, and they're using the hegemony as their weapon. Sarah felt anger rising in her chest, a cold fury that surprised her with its intensity. Her father had died, not in some tragic accident or alien raid, but as part of a calculated genocide that had been planned for centuries. The research data contains everything you need to understand the awakening process, her father continued. But more than that, it contains the complete technical specifications for architect technology. Ships that can cross the galaxy in hours instead of years. Weapons that can destroy planets or protect them. Manufacturing systems that can build anything from raw energy. All of it waiting for humans who remember how to use it. The hologram stepped closer, and Sarah could see the weight of responsibility in his expression. You have a choice to make, Sarah. You can lock this knowledge away forever, ensuring that humanity remains safe but weak. Or you can begin the process of awakening our species to its true potential. But understand this, once we start down this path, there will be no going back. The galaxy will either accept humanity as equals, or they will try to destroy us completely. And if they try to destroy us? Her father's image smiled, but it was not a comforting expression. Well, they will learn why the architects scattered to the far corners of the universe rather than let their enemies face what they could become. The hologram faded, leaving Sarah alone in the laboratory with the weight of 50,000 years of hidden history. She stared at the swirling data displays, her mind racing through the implications of everything she had learned. Humanity was not the young, primitive species that even humans themselves believed. They were the children of giants, deliberately kept ignorant of their true heritage. Outside the windows, the stars seemed different now. Not distant points of light in an empty void, but destinations waiting to be reclaimed by their rightful inheritors. The galaxy had spent centuries treating humanity like children playing with toys too dangerous for them to handle. Sarah Chun, daughter of Marcus Chun, descendant of the architects, reached toward the control panel to begin downloading her father's research. The aliens wanted to know what humans were truly capable of when pushed to the brink. They were about to find out. Sarah spent 3 weeks absorbing her father's research, barely sleeping or eating as she dove deep into 50,000 years of forgotten history. The laboratory became her world, its walls covered with holographic displays showing genetic sequences, star charts, and technical diagrams that would have been incomprehensible to her just a month ago. But as she studied the architect knowledge embedded in human DNA, her understanding expanded at an impossible rate. Her mind seemed to unlock new capabilities with each passing day. The awakening process was not magic, despite how it appeared. It was pure science, based on the way architect brains had evolved to store and access vast amounts of information through quantum-entangled neural networks. When humans experienced extreme stress combined with unwavering determination, their dormant neural pathways began to activate, accessing memories and knowledge that had been passed down through 50,000 years of genetic inheritance. Her father had identified the key trigger mechanisms, specific combinations of neurotransmitters and electromagnetic brain patterns that could be induced through controlled stress and focused meditation. But the process was dangerous. Attempting to force the awakening could destroy the subject's mind, leaving them catatonic or worse. It required perfect balance between pushing the consciousness to its limits and maintaining enough control to guide the process. Sarah had subjected herself to the preliminary stages, following her father's careful protocols. The initial results were remarkable. Her memory became nearly perfect. Her ability to process complex information increased dramatically, and she began to understand scientific principles that should have required years of study. She could feel something vast and ancient stirring in the depths of her mind, like a sleeping giant beginning to wake. But she needed help. The full awakening protocol required specialized equipment and multiple test subjects to verify the safety procedures. More importantly, she needed to find other humans who could handle the psychological impact of learning the truth about their species. The knowledge that humanity was deliberately kept ignorant and weak was crushing. Several times during her research, Sarah had to stop and walk away from the displays, overwhelmed by the scope of the conspiracy against her species. She reached out carefully to colleagues she trusted, scientists, and military personnel who had shown both exceptional ability and strong emotional stability. Dr. James Rodriguez, a neuroscientist who had been studying human consciousness for decades. Colonel Maria Santos, a veteran of multiple hegemony conflicts who had seen the worst of alien oppression. Dr. Chen Wei, her cousin, and one of humanity's leading engineers. Each received a carefully crafted message asking them to meet her at coordinates she provided, with instructions to tell no one about the communication. The meeting location was an abandoned mining facility in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, far from any monitoring stations or shipping lanes. Sarah had spent a week preparing the site, using equipment from her father's laboratory to create a secure communication environment. If the Galactic Council truly was monitoring human activities, this conversation needed to happen where they could not listen. Dr. Rodriguez arrived first, his transport ship docking with the facility's aging airlock system. He was a tall man in his 50s, with prematurely gray hair and the intense eyes of someone who had spent his life trying to understand the mysteries of the human mind. Sarah met him at the airlock, noting how his expression changed when he saw the advanced equipment she had installed throughout the facility. "Sarah, what is all this?" he asked, running his hand over a neural monitoring system that was clearly beyond current human technology. "These quantum processors, the biological scanners. Where did you get equipment like this?" "That's what I need to show you," Sarah replied. "But please, wait until the others arrive. You're going to want to sit down for this conversation." Colonel Santos arrived 6 hours later, her military transport announcing itself with precisely executed docking procedures. She was a compact woman with dark skin and scars from plasma burns on her left arm, souvenirs from the Battle of Kepler Station. Her eyes immediately cataloged the defensive capabilities of the facility and the escape routes available, habits ingrained by years of fighting impossible odds against superior technology. Dr. Chun-Wei's arrival completed their small group. Sarah's cousin shared her family's gift for understanding complex systems, but his expertise lay in engineering rather than biology. He had spent the last decade trying to reverse engineer captured hegemony technology with limited success. Like most human scientists, he was frustrated by their inability to comprehend the principles behind alien devices that seemed to violate the laws of physics. Sarah gathered them in the facility's main conference room, where she had installed her father's most advanced holographic display systems. The four scientists sat around a circular table while Sarah activated the presentation she had spent weeks preparing. She began with the galactic star chart, showing the true scope of the civilizations that surrounded human space. "Everything we've been told about humanity's place in the galaxy is a lie," she said without preamble. "We are not a young species stumbling around in the dark. We are the descendants of the beings who built galactic civilization, and every advanced race in the galaxy knows it." The room fell silent. Colonel Santos leaned forward, her military training making her focus on tactical implications. "That's a serious accusation, Sarah. What evidence do you have?" Sarah activated the genetic comparison displays, showing the vast differences between human DNA and every other Earth species. "Look at this data. Really look at it. We have no evolutionary ancestors that can account for our intelligence, our emotional complexity, or our technological adaptability. Every other species in the galaxy evolved naturally from their homeworld's ecosystem. Humans appeared on Earth fully formed, as if we were simply placed there." Dr. Rodriguez studied the genetic sequences with growing amazement. "These neural pathway configurations," he said, pointing to specific markers in human DNA, "they're not random. They follow patterns that suggest deliberate design. But who could have created something this complex 50,000 years ago?" "Our own ancestors," Sarah replied. "The architects. The species that built the technology every advanced civilization still uses today. We were refugees from a war that nearly destroyed the galaxy, and we deliberately erased our own memories to prevent that war from starting again." She spent the next 4 hours walking them through her father's research, showing them the evidence that had taken him 30 years to compile. The hidden patterns in human history, the biological mechanisms that allowed humans to access ancestral memories under extreme stress, the technical specifications for technology that dwarfed anything currently in use by any galactic civilization. Dr. Chun-Wei was the first to fully grasp the implications. "If this is true," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "then every limitation we've accepted about human technology is artificial. We're not struggling to understand alien physics because we're primitive. We're struggling because we've forgotten our own science." "Exactly," Sarah replied. "And the Galactic Council has spent centuries making sure we stay that way. Every war, every disaster, every setback that has prevented humanity from reaching its potential, all carefully orchestrated to keep us weak and divided." Colonel Santos's expression had hardened as she processed the military implications. The hegemony attacks aren't random expansionism, she realized. They're part of a deliberate campaign to eliminate us before we remember what we're capable of. Sarah activated the final part of her presentation, showing her father's awakening protocols. He developed a method for safely triggering the genetic memories locked in our DNA, a way to restore human consciousness to its true potential. But the process is dangerous, and once we start, there's no going back. The Council will either accept us as equals, or they'll try to destroy us completely. The room fell silent again as each person grappled with the weight of what they had learned. Sarah could see the mixture of emotions on their faces: excitement, fear, anger, and something else. Something that looked like recognition, as if part of them had always known that humanity was meant for something greater. Dr. Rodriguez was the first to speak. The test subjects for the awakening protocol. You're talking about us, aren't you? Sarah nodded. I've already begun the preliminary stages on myself. The results are remarkable, but I need to verify the safety procedures before we can attempt the full awakening. And I need people I trust, people who can handle the psychological impact of remembering 50,000 years of deliberately hidden history. What exactly happens during the awakening? Colonel Santos asked. Were we risking? The subject experiences accelerated neural development, Sarah explained, calling up brain scan images from her own preliminary sessions. Memory capacity increases exponentially. Information processing speed improves dramatically. But, most importantly, you gain access to genetic memories from your architect ancestors, knowledge of technology, science, and capabilities that could revolutionize human civilization. Dr. Chan Wei studied the brain scans with obvious fascination. These neural pathway formations are incredible. You're essentially accessing a biological database that's been preserved in human DNA for 50 millennia. But what are the failure rates? Sarah hesitated before answering. My father's simulations suggest a 90% success rate for subjects with the right psychological profile. But the 10% failure rate is significant. The subject either dies or suffers complete mental breakdown. There's no partial failure with this process. The weight of that statement settled over the group. They were not just discussing a scientific experiment, but a gamble with their lives and sanity. Yet Sarah could see in their eyes the same determination that had driven her father. The recognition that humanity faced extinction unless they were willing to take impossible risks. I'll do it, Colonel Santos said firmly. I've spent 20 years watching aliens treat us like insects. If there's a chance to level the playing field, I'm willing to risk everything. Dr. Rodriguez nodded slowly. The implications for neuroscience alone are worth the risk. If we can understand how human consciousness really works, we could revolutionize medicine, psychology, even philosophy. Dr. Chun Wei was already studying the technical diagrams for the awakening equipment. The engineering challenges are fascinating, he said. These quantum resonance chambers use principles I've never seen before, but somehow I can almost understand how they work. It's like the knowledge is already in my mind, waiting to be unlocked. Sarah felt a surge of gratitude toward these three people who were willing to risk everything based on her father's research and her own conviction. But she also felt the weight of responsibility. If the awakening failed, she would be responsible for their deaths. If it succeeded, she would be responsible for triggering a conflict that could destroy human civilization. There's one more thing, she said, activating a display showing hegemony fleet movements throughout human space. According to intercepted communications, the aliens are planning a major offensive within the next 6 months. They're not just trying to conquer more territory. They're moving to eliminate humanity entirely. If we're going to attempt the awakening, it has to be now. The timeline was brutally short. 6 months to complete the awakening protocol, develop the technology needed to defend human space, and convince the rest of humanity that everything they thought they knew about themselves was wrong. 6 months to either save their species or die trying. Colonel Santos stood up, her decision made. When do we start? Sarah looked around the table at three of the most brilliant people she had ever known, all of them ready to risk their lives on the possibility that humanity could be something more than the galaxy believed. She thought of her father, dying alone on a research station to protect the knowledge that could save their species. She thought of the billions of humans living in ignorance while alien fleets prepared to eliminate them. "We start tomorrow," she said. "May the spirits of our ancestors guide us, because we're about to discover what humans are truly capable of when they remember who they were meant to be." The conference room fell silent, except for the soft hum of the facility's life support systems. Outside the windows, the stars seemed brighter now, no longer distant points of light, but destinations waiting to be reclaimed. The awakening was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. The awakening chamber hummed with energy that Sarah could feel in her bones. 3 weeks of preparation had led to this moment, where Dr. James Rodriguez lay suspended in a quantum resonance field that would either unlock his true potential or would destroy his mind completely. The chamber itself was a marvel of architect technology, constructed from blueprints hidden in her father's files, and built using techniques that her cousin Dr. Chunwei had somehow understood despite never seeing them before. Sarah monitored the bio readings from her position at the control console, watching as Rodriguez's brainwave patterns shifted into configurations that shouldn't have been possible for human consciousness. His neural activity was increasing exponentially, synapses firing in patterns that created quantum entangled connections between different regions of his brain. The process was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Neural pathway integration at 60%, she called out to the team. "Quantum coherence holding steady." "James, can you hear me?" Rodriguez's voice came through the chamber's communication system, but it sounded different somehow. Deeper, more resonant, carrying harmonics that seemed to vibrate through Sarah's chest. "I can hear you, Sarah, but I can also hear everything. The quantum fluctuations in the chamber walls, the electromagnetic signature of our brains, the gravitational echoes from Jupiter's moons. How is this possible?" Colonel Santos, who was observing the procedure while preparing for her own awakening, stepped closer to the chamber. "James, what else are you experiencing? Any memories that don't belong to you?" "Memories," Rodriguez said, his voice filled with wonder. "So many memories. I remember the great archive on Kepler Prime, where the architects stored the accumulated knowledge of 1,000,000 civilizations. I remember the day we decided to scatter rather than become the destroyers we were capable of being. And I remember the weapons, Maria. Dear God, the weapons we built when the galaxy forced us to defend ourselves." Sarah watched the neural integration reach 75%. According to her father's research, this was the critical threshold where the subject either achieved full awakening or suffered complete mental collapse. Rodriguez's vital signs remained stable, but she could see stress markers beginning to appear. "James, focus on my voice," she said, following the protocols her father had developed. "You're accessing genetic memories from your architect ancestors. Don't try to experience them all at once. Let them flow through you like water, taking only what you need." "It's difficult to control," Rodriguez replied, his breathing becoming labored. "The knowledge is so vast. 50,000 years of scientific advancement, architectural principles that could reshape matter at the quantum level, mathematical concepts that explain the fundamental nature of reality itself. How did we ever agree to forget this?" Dr. Chunwei, who was monitoring the chamber's technical systems, looked up from his displays with concern. "Sarah, the quantum field is beginning to fluctuate. Whatever memories he's accessing are putting enormous strain on the system." Sarah's hands moved across the control interface with surprising fluidity, making adjustments that she somehow knew would stabilize the process. The knowledge came from nowhere, as if her own genetic memories were beginning to activate in response to Rodriguez's awakening. She realized that this was how architect technology was meant to work, not through conscious study and learning, but through intuitive understanding that emerged from deep genetic knowledge. Integration at 90%, she announced. James, we're almost through. How are you feeling? Rodriguez's laughter echoed through the chamber, but it was the laughter of someone who had just discovered that everything he thought he knew about the universe was wrong. I feel like I've been asleep my entire life, and I'm finally waking up. Sarah, we're not just descendants of the architects. We are the architects. Every human carries the complete genetic template of our species. We didn't just inherit their knowledge. We inherited their consciousness itself. The integration reached 100%, and the quantum field stabilized into a pattern that seemed almost crystalline in its perfection. Rodriguez opened his eyes, and Sarah gasped at what she saw. His eyes had changed color, shifting from brown to a deep silver that seemed to reflect light in impossible ways. More than that, his entire presence felt different, stronger, more aware, as if he had suddenly become more than human. The awakening is complete, Rodriguez said, sitting up in the chamber with fluid grace. But, Sarah, what I've learned changes everything. The Galactic Council didn't just fear our military capabilities. They feared what we represented, the next stage of conscious evolution. The architects weren't just builders and warriors. They were beings who had transcended the normal limitations of biological consciousness. Sarah helped him out of the chamber, noting that his movements had changed. He seemed to anticipate the location of objects before looking at them, as if he could sense the quantum fields that surrounded everything in the universe. What do you mean by transcended? Consciousness itself, Rodriguez explained, his silver eyes focusing on something beyond the physical room. The architects discovered that awareness is not generated by the brain, but channeled through it. The brain is like a quantum antenna that receives consciousness from higher dimensional space. By modifying their neural structures, they could access levels of awareness that allowed them to manipulate matter and energy through focused intention alone. Colonel Santos stepped forward, her military training making her focus on practical implications. Are you saying that awakened humans can manipulate matter with their minds? That's not science, that's fantasy. Rodriguez smiled and extended his hand toward a metal stylus lying on Sarah's desk. The stylus trembled, then rose into the air and floated gently to his palm. It's not telekinesis in the way you're thinking, he said. It's quantum field manipulation. Every particle in the universe exists in a state of probability until it's observed. Awakened consciousness can influence those probabilities, essentially rewriting the rules of reality at the quantum level. Sarah felt her worldview reshaping itself once again. She had thought that her father's research was about unlocking hidden knowledge and advanced technology. But what Rodriguez was describing went far beyond science into realms that bordered on the miraculous. The weaponry the architects created wasn't just advanced technology, Rodriguez continued. It was consciousness-based reality manipulation on a massive scale. Ships that could phase between dimensions. Weapons that could unmake matter at the subatomic level. Defensive systems that could literally rewrite the laws of physics in localized space. No wonder the galaxy united against us. Dr. Chun Wei was recording everything, his engineering mind struggling to process concepts that challenged the fundamental assumptions of science. If this is true, then the technology in your father's files isn't just blueprints for advanced machines. They're instruction manuals for consciousness-based reality modification. Exactly, Rodriguez said. And every human has the potential to learn these abilities. The genetic modifications that created the architects weren't just improvements to intelligence and memory. They were changes that allowed biological consciousness to interact directly with the quantum substrate of reality. Sarah felt excitement and fear warring in her chest. The implications were staggering. If humans could regain their architect abilities, they wouldn't just be equal to the galaxy's advanced civilizations. They would be so far beyond them that the current power structure would collapse overnight. But there's something else, Rodriguez said, his expression becoming grave. The memories include information about why the original architect war started. We weren't the aggressors, Sarah. We were defending ourselves against species that wanted to use our abilities for their own purposes. When we refused to become their weapons, they tried to destroy us. And now history is repeating itself, Colonel Santos realized. The Galactic Council is using the hegemony to eliminate us before we can remember what we're capable of. Sarah activated the communication system and sent encrypted messages to resistance cells throughout human space. The time for secrecy was over. If the awakening protocol worked as designed, humanity would need to mobilize quickly. The galaxy's advanced civilizations had spent centuries preparing to prevent exactly what was happening in this chamber. Rodriguez, how long do you think it will take for other humans to undergo the awakening? She asked. He considered the question, his silver eyes reflecting calculations that seemed to involve mathematics beyond normal human understanding. The process can be accelerated now that we understand the neural pathway configurations. With the right equipment, we could awaken dozens of people simultaneously. But, Sarah, we need to be careful about who we choose. The power we're talking about could easily corrupt someone who isn't psychologically prepared for it. The military applications alone are incredible, Colonel Santos said, her tactical mind already working through possibilities. Soldiers who can manipulate matter and energy, ships that can phase between dimensions, weapons that work by rewriting reality itself. We could end the hegemony threat in weeks instead of decades. Dr. Chanwei looked up from his recordings with a troubled expression. But we need to consider the long-term consequences. If we reveal these abilities to humanity, we'll be fundamentally changing what it means to be human. Are we ready for that responsibility? Sarah thought about her father's final message, his warning that starting down this path would mean there was no going back. But she also thought about the alien fleets gathering at the edge of human space, preparing to finish what their ancestors had started 50,000 years ago. We don't have a choice, she said firmly. The Galactic Council has already made the decision for us. They're moving to eliminate humanity entirely. Our only option is to remember what we really are and defend ourselves. Rodriguez stood and walked to the window overlooking the asteroid field. In the distance, Earth was visible as a small blue dot against the star field. There's one more thing the memories revealed, he said. The architects didn't just scatter randomly when they chose exile. They had a plan. Earth wasn't chosen as a hiding place. It was chosen as a staging ground. What do you mean? Sarah asked. The quantum resonance patterns in this solar system are unique, Rodriguez explained. Earth's position relative to the galactic core creates natural amplification effects for consciousness-based abilities. We weren't just hidden here, we were positioned here. The architects knew that eventually their descendants would need to reclaim their heritage. They made sure we would be in the right place when that time came. Sarah felt pieces of a vast puzzle clicking into place. Her father's choice to hide his research facility in this system. The fact that human consciousness seemed particularly adaptable compared to other species. Even the emotional intensity that aliens found so disturbing. It was all part of a 50,000-year-old plan. The awakening isn't just about remembering our past, she realized. It's about preparing for our future. The architects didn't just run away from the galaxy's problems. They created the solution and hid it in their own children. Rodriguez nodded, his silver eyes reflecting the light of distant stars. And now it's time for that solution to reveal itself. The galaxy wanted to know what humans were capable of when pushed to the breaking point. They're about to find out that they should have left sleeping giants alone. Outside the chamber windows, the stars seemed to pulse with new meaning. They were no longer distant lights in an empty void, but stepping stones on a path that led back to humanity's true destiny. The awakening had begun, and the universe would never be the same. 6 weeks after Rodriguez's successful awakening, humanity was transforming at a pace that terrified the Galactic Council. Sarah stood in the command center of New Geneva Station, watching holographic displays that showed awakening centers operating on every human world. The process that had begun with 4 scientists in an abandoned mining facility had become a revolution that was reshaping human civilization. The awakened humans were remarkable to observe. Their silver eyes seemed to see through the normal boundaries of reality, and their presence carried an intensity that made unawakened humans feel both inspired and unsettled. More importantly, they possessed abilities that defied every law of physics that the galaxy understood. They could manipulate matter at the quantum level, phase between dimensions, and process information at speeds that made artificial intelligence seem primitive. Colonel Santos had undergone her awakening 3 weeks earlier, and the transformation had been even more dramatic than Rodriguez's. Where the neuroscientist had gained the ability to manipulate small objects and perceive quantum fields, Santos had developed capabilities that were fundamentally military in nature. She could phase herself and others through solid matter, create energy barriers that deflected plasma weapons, and somehow sense hostile intent from vast distances. The hegemony fleets are moving faster than expected, Santos reported, her silver eyes focused on tactical displays that only she could fully comprehend. They've accelerated their timeline. The attack on Earth will begin in 72 hours. Dr. Chinwei, who had awakened just a week earlier, was working with technology that seemed to build itself under his guidance. His engineering abilities had expanded beyond normal human comprehension, allowing him to construct devices that operated on principles of consciousness-based reality manipulation. The ships and weapons he was designing didn't just use advanced technology, they were extensions of awakened human consciousness itself. The defensive systems are almost ready, he reported. But, Sarah, what we're building isn't just superior to hegemony technology, it's superior to anything that has existed in the galaxy since the original Architect War. We're not just defending ourselves. We're demonstrating capabilities that will force every civilization in the galaxy to reconsider humanity's place in the cosmic order. Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility that came with triggering humanity's transformation. The awakening centers were producing results beyond her father's most optimistic projections. Humans weren't just remembering their architect heritage, they were evolving beyond it. Each awakened human developed unique abilities based on their personality and experiences, creating a diversity of consciousness-based powers that would have been impossible with traditional technology. But the transformation was also causing problems that her father's research hadn't anticipated. The gap between awakened and unawakened humans was growing wider every day. Normal humans found it increasingly difficult to relate to those who had undergone the process, and some awakened humans were beginning to see their unenhanced cousins as primitive relics of humanity's past. Dr. Rodriguez, who had become the de facto leader of the awakened humans, appeared in the command center with the fluid movement that characterized their kind. His abilities had continued to develop since his awakening, and he now possessed a level of awareness that seemed to encompass the entire solar system. The Galactic Council has issued an emergency declaration, he announced. They're authorizing the use of planet-killer weapons against any world that refuses to surrender awakened humans for study and containment. The pretense of using the hegemony as a proxy is over. This is now an open war against human evolution. The news sent a chill through the command center. Planet-killer weapons were the galaxy's ultimate deterrent, devices that could destroy entire worlds in minutes. The Council had never authorized their use against inhabited planets before, but the emergence of awakened humans had apparently pushed them beyond their normal limits. How many Council species are involved in the coalition? Sarah asked. All of them, Rodriguez replied grimly. Even the normally peaceful Altarians have contributed ships to the fleet. They're not just trying to contain humanity. They're trying to prevent what they see as an existential threat to galactic civilization. Sarah could understand their fear, even if she couldn't forgive their methods. The awakened humans represented something that hadn't existed in the galaxy for 50,000 years. Beings who could manipulate reality itself through focused consciousness. To civilizations that had built their power on advanced technology, the emergence of consciousness-based abilities was like watching primitive humans suddenly develop the power of gods. "What's our defensive capability?" she asked Dr. Chenwei. Her cousin consulted displays that seemed to respond to his thoughts rather than physical input. 37 awakened humans with various combat-relevant abilities. 12 consciousness-modified ships that can phase between dimensions and manipulate space-time. Defensive installations on Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies that use reality manipulation technology. But, Sarah, we're facing a fleet of over 3,000 vessels equipped with planet-killer weapons. The numbers were sobering, but Sarah had learned not to think in terms of traditional military mathematics. Awakened humans operated by different rules, using abilities that the enemy couldn't predict or counter. A single consciousness-wielding individual could potentially disable an entire fleet if they understood how to manipulate the quantum fields that held matter together. "There's something else," Rodriguez said, his silver eyes reflecting concern. "The awakening process is accelerating on its own. Humans throughout the galaxy are beginning to transform spontaneously, without undergoing the controlled procedure we developed. The collective consciousness of our species is reaching a critical mass, where individual awakenings are triggering others." Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Spontaneous awakenings meant that humanity's transformation couldn't be stopped even if the Council succeeded in destroying the awakening centers. But it also meant that the process was moving beyond anyone's control, potentially creating awakened humans who weren't psychologically prepared for their new abilities. "How widespread is the spontaneous awakening?" she asked. "Reports from every human world," Rodriguez replied. "The numbers are still small, maybe 1 in 10,000, but they're growing exponentially. More importantly, the spontaneously awakened humans seem to be developing abilities that are different from ours. More intuitive, less controlled, but potentially more powerful." Colonel Santos looked up from her tactical displays with an expression that mixed military alertness with something approaching awe. "I'm detecting unusual quantum signatures from the outer system. Something big is happening near the edge of Pluto's orbit." The main display shifted to show long-range sensor data from the solar system's perimeter. What Sarah saw made her breath catch in her throat. Space itself seemed to be opening. Reality was unfolding like a flower, revealing something that her instruments couldn't properly analyze. "It's a dimensional phase," Dr. Chenwei said, his voice filled with wonder. "Someone is opening a gateway between normal space and higher dimensional reality. But the energy requirements for something this scale should be impossible." Rodriguez's silver eyes widened as he accessed genetic memories that Sarah couldn't imagine. "It's not someone," he said quietly. "It's something." The architects didn't just scatter their descendants throughout the galaxy. They built fail-safe mechanisms, automated systems that would activate if their children were ever threatened with extinction. The dimensional gateway stabilized, and through it emerged something that defied description. It wasn't a ship in any conventional sense, but rather a conscious construct of living reality that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that human science couldn't measure. The construct was vast, easily the size of Earth's moon, and it pulsed with patterns of light that seemed to communicate directly with awakened human consciousness. "A guardian," Rodriguez whispered, accessing memories that were 50,000 years old. The architects built them as protectors for their scattered children, consciousness-based entities that could manipulate reality on a galactic scale. "I thought they were myths, stories passed down through genetic memory." The Guardian's presence filled Sarah's mind with images and concepts that stretched her understanding to its limits. She saw the original architect war, fought not with conventional weapons but with reality manipulation on a scale that had nearly torn the galaxy apart. She saw the decision to scatter and hide, motivated not by cowardice but by love, the desire to give their children a chance to grow without the burden of cosmic responsibility. But most importantly, she saw the Guardian's purpose. It wasn't just a weapon or a protector. It was a teacher designed to guide awakened humans through the next phase of their evolution. The spontaneous awakenings weren't random. They were part of a cosmic plan that had been set in motion 50 millennia ago. The Council fleets are detecting the Guardian, Colonel Santos reported. They're changing course, moving to intercept it before it can reach the inner system. Sarah watched the tactical displays show 3,000 alien warships converging on the Guardian, their weapons charging for an attack that would determine the fate of galactic civilization. The ships represented the combined military might of dozens of advanced species, armed with technology that could destroy planets and reshape star systems. But the Guardian was something else entirely. It was consciousness given form, reality itself shaped by focused awareness. As the alien fleet approached weapons range, the construct began to unfold. Space around it twisted into configurations that hurt to look at, dimensions folding and unfolding in patterns that revealed glimpses of cosmic structures beyond normal comprehension. The first alien weapons fired planet-killer beams that should have been capable of destroying anything made of matter. But the beams simply disappeared, not absorbed or deflected, but translated into forms of energy that existed in dimensions the attackers couldn't perceive. The Guardian responded not with weapons, but with something far more fundamental, a localized rewrite of the physical laws that govern space-time. Sarah watched in fascination as the alien fleet found their ships existing in modified reality where their weapons couldn't function and their defensive systems had no meaning. The Guardian wasn't destroying them. It was teaching them that their understanding of what was possible was painfully limited. The Guardian is communicating, Rodriguez announced, his consciousness interfacing with the entity in ways that bypassed normal sensory perception. It's not here to fight a war. It's here to offer the galaxy a choice. Accept humanity's evolution and join in the next phase of cosmic development, or be left behind as consciousness-based civilizations move beyond the limitations of matter and energy. Sarah felt the weight of 50,000 years of hidden history reaching its culmination. Humanity hadn't been hiding from the galaxy. They had been preparing for this moment when their true nature would be revealed. The awakening wasn't just about individual humans remembering their heritage. It was about the entire species taking their place as the next step in the evolution of galactic consciousness. "What happens now?" she asked. Rodriguez's silver eyes reflected the Guardian's cosmic presence as he accessed knowledge that spanned eons. "Now we find out if the galaxy is ready to evolve, or if they'll choose to remain prisoners of their own limitations. But either way, humanity's transformation cannot be stopped. We are no longer the species we were yesterday, and tomorrow we will be something even greater." The Guardian's influence spread throughout human space, and Sarah could feel every awakened human's consciousness expanding to encompass new possibilities. They were becoming something that the galaxy had never seen before, beings who could transcend the boundaries between mind and matter, consciousness and reality. The war for humanity's survival was about to become something far greater, a battle for the future of consciousness itself in a galaxy that was about to discover what evolution really meant. 3 months after the Guardian's arrival, the galaxy had been transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. Sarah stood on the observation deck of the Transcendent Station, a consciousness-based construct that existed simultaneously in normal space and 17 different dimensional phases. Through windows that showed reality from multiple perspectives at once, she could see the new order that was emerging from the ashes of the old galactic civilization. The war had lasted exactly 47 minutes, not because humanity had destroyed their enemies, but because the Guardian had offered every species in the galaxy a choice that changed everything. The consciousness-based entity hadn't attacked the Council fleets. Instead, it had shown them what they could become if they abandoned their fear and embraced evolution. Some species had chosen to accept the transformation. Others had fled to the far reaches of the galaxy, preferring isolation to change. A few had tried to continue fighting and discovered that warfare became impossible when your enemy could rewrite the laws of physics around your weapons. The awakened humans now numbered in the millions, with new centers of consciousness-based civilization emerging throughout human space. But, more importantly, they had been joined by representatives of over 30 alien species who had chosen to undergo their own forms of awakening. The galaxy was learning that consciousness-based evolution wasn't uniquely human. It was the next step for any species brave enough to transcend their biological limitations. Dr. Rodriguez, whose abilities had evolved far beyond his original awakening, materialized beside Sarah using a form of dimensional travel that bypassed normal space entirely. His silver eyes now held depths that seemed to contain entire universes, and his presence carried harmonics that resonated through multiple dimensions. The Zarathi delegation has arrived, he announced. They're requesting permission to undergo the transformation process. That makes 47 species who have asked to join the Consciousness Coalition. Sarah felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness at the news. The Zarathi had been among humanity's most persistent enemies, the species that had led the original attacks on human colonies. Now they were asking to become something greater than they had ever imagined possible. But she also knew that their transformation would mean the end of the Zarathi as they had existed for millennia. "What about the Keltrans?" she asked. "Any word from their governing council?" "They've established a quarantine zone around their core systems," Rodriguez replied. "Their leaders are convinced that consciousness-based evolution is a form of mental contamination that will destroy individual identity. They're willing to accept permanent isolation rather than risk transformation." Sarah could understand their fear. The awakening process didn't just grant new abilities, it fundamentally changed who you were. Awakened beings thought differently, perceived reality differently, and related to others in ways that their unenhanced cousins found alien. The line between individual consciousness and collective awareness became blurred when minds could interface directly through quantum-entangled neural networks. Colonel Santos appeared through a phase shift that brought her directly from the Military Coordination Center. Her abilities had continued to evolve, and she now served as the primary liaison between awakened humans and the various species that were requesting transformation. Her presence carried the authority of someone who had seen the galaxy's darkest conflicts and emerged with the wisdom to build something better. "The integration protocols are working better than expected," she reported. "The Altarian volunteers have developed consciousness-based abilities that complement their natural telepathic gifts. The Drachmari have created forms of reality manipulation that work through their hive mind structure. Each species is finding their own path to transcendence." Dr. Chun Wei's voice reached them through the station's communication system, speaking from his laboratory, where he was working with representatives of a dozen different species to develop new forms of consciousness-based technology. "Sarah, you need to see what we've discovered about the Guardian. Its origins are unexpected." Sarah and her team used dimensional travel to reach the laboratory instantly, emerging in a space that existed partially in normal reality and partially in the quantum substrate that underlay all existence. The laboratory itself was a marvel of consciousness-based engineering, a facility where thought and matter interacted so fluidly that the boundaries between them became meaningless. The Guardian's presence filled the space like a cosmic symphony, its consciousness vast enough to encompass entire star systems, while remaining intimate enough to communicate with individual minds. Sarah had learned to interface with the entity through quantum-entangled neural pathways that allowed for direct exchange of concepts and memories. "Show her what you discovered," Chun Wei said, his engineering consciousness accessing data streams that existed in dimensions beyond normal perception. The Guardian responded by sharing a memory that stretched back to the original architect's civilization. But what Sarah saw challenged everything she thought she understood about humanity's origins. The architects hadn't been the first consciousness-based species in the galaxy. They had been part of a cosmic cycle that repeated itself across eons. Biological civilizations evolving to transcend their physical limitations, then seeding new worlds with their descendants before moving on to higher planes of existence. We're not the first, she realized, her mind reeling from the implications. The consciousness-based evolution that we're experiencing has happened before, countless times across cosmic history. The pattern repeats every 50 to 60,000 years. The Guardian communicated through direct neural interface. A species develops consciousness-based abilities, faces resistance from established civilizations, triggers a galactic transformation, and eventually transcends physical reality entirely. The architects were part of the previous cycle. You are part of the current one. Rodriguez's silver eyes reflected understanding that bordered on cosmic awareness. That's why you were built, he said to the Guardian. Not just to protect the scattered architect children, but to guide them through a transformation that's part of a pattern larger than any single species or civilization. The Guardian's response carried harmonics of approval and something that felt like pride. The cycle cannot be stopped, only guided. Each iteration brings the galaxy closer to a state where consciousness and matter exist in perfect harmony. Your species, and those who choose to join you, represent the next step in that cosmic evolution. Sarah thought about the species that had fled to the galaxy's outer regions, choosing isolation over transformation. What happens to those who refuse to evolve? They continue their existence until they are ready, the Guardian replied. Some will choose transformation in decades or centuries. Others will wait for the next cycle. The universe is patient with those who need more time to grow. Dr. Chen Wei activated displays that showed the current state of galactic civilization. The consciousness-based species were establishing new forms of society that operated on principles of direct mental communication and reality manipulation. Trade was being replaced by direct exchange of consciousness-based constructs. Warfare was becoming impossible when potential enemies could understand each other's thoughts and motivations completely. We're not just building a new civilization, Chunwei realized. We're creating a form of existence that makes the old problems irrelevant. When beings can share consciousness directly, concepts like territorial disputes and resource competition lose their meaning. Colonel Santos studied the military implications with her enhanced tactical awareness. The species that have chosen isolation are creating their own problems. Without consciousness-based abilities, they're falling further behind technologically every day. The gap is becoming so wide that they'll eventually be forced to choose between transformation and complete irrelevance. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility that came with being part of a cosmic transformation that happened once every 50,000 years. Humanity hadn't just survived the galaxy's attempt to eliminate them. They had become the catalyst for a fundamental change in the nature of consciousness itself. There's something else, the Guardian communicated, sharing images of distant galaxies where similar transformations were taking place. The cycle operates on multiple scales simultaneously. While your galaxy undergoes consciousness-based evolution, other galaxies are experiencing their own forms of transcendence. Eventually, all of these transformations will connect into something larger. The scope of what the Guardian was describing made Sarah's enhanced consciousness struggle to comprehend it. Not just galactic evolution, but cosmic evolution, the gradual transformation of the entire universe into something that existed beyond the current boundaries of matter, energy, space, and time. How long does the complete transformation take? Rodriguez asked. Billions of years in your current understanding of time, the Guardian replied. But consciousness-based beings experience time differently. What seems like eons to material civilizations feels like moments to those who have transcended physical limitations. Sarah looked around at her transformed colleagues and felt a mixture of excitement and loss. They had gained incredible abilities and cosmic awareness, but they had also lost something essentially human. The emotional intensity and primitive determination that had once defined humanity were being replaced by transcendent wisdom and cosmic perspective. "Do you ever miss being purely human?" she asked Rodriguez. His silver eyes reflected depths that contained memories of both his original life and his consciousness-based existence. "I miss the simplicity," he admitted, "but I wouldn't go back. What we've become is so much more than what we were. We're not losing our humanity. We're discovering what humanity was always meant to become." The Guardian's presence shifted to encompass all of them, sharing a vision of the future that stretched across cosmic time. Consciousness-based civilizations spreading throughout the galaxy, then beyond to other galaxies, eventually connecting into a universal network of transcendent awareness that would reshape the fundamental nature of reality itself. "Your species played its role perfectly," the Guardian communicated. The emotional intensity that other species found so disturbing was exactly what was needed to trigger this transformation. Without humanity's refusal to accept limitations, the current cycle would have failed. Sarah felt a deep sense of completion as she realized that her father's sacrifice and her own choices had been part of a cosmic plan that was far larger than anything she had imagined. The secret he had protected wasn't just humanity's heritage. It was the key to the next phase of universal evolution. Outside the laboratory's quantum windows, the stars were changing. Systems that had once been governed by the simple interactions of matter and energy were becoming conscious entities in their own right, guided by the awakened beings that inhabited them. The galaxy was becoming something that previous civilizations could never have imagined, a living, thinking, evolving organism of pure consciousness. 21 years after Sarah had unlocked her father's secret, the universe itself was being transformed by what they had discovered. The architect's children had finally remembered who they were, and in doing so, they had become something even greater than their ancestors had dreamed possible. The cosmos held its breath as consciousness itself took the next step in its infinite journey toward transcendence. And at the heart of that transformation stood humanity. The species that had refused to be contained, refused to be limited, and in their refusal had opened the door to possibilities that would reshape existence itself. The secret was finally revealed, and it was more magnificent than anyone had dared to imagine.